Cybersecurity Risk Assessment Presentation from New Zealand, Group 4. Current practices that are used to reduce the amount of cybersecurity risk include access control. Access control restricts access to sensitive data. Access control also refers to restricting access to sensitive physical locations. There are a few components of access control. However, the major ones are authentication and authorization. While similar, authentication validates the identity of a user, whereas authorization grants specific access rights or privileges to specific users. The following slides will go more in depth about these concepts. Access control involves granting or revoking entry into a system, file, application, or location, and is important because it reduces the risk of unauthorized access to sensitive data and locations. Access control is also important considering it's a regulatory compliance requirement. For example, ISO 27001 has an international standard focused on information security that requires management to thoroughly examine the organization's attack vectors and audit all cybersecurity threats and vulnerabilities. Risk mitigation is also required to ensure information security while operating seamlessly. There are several types of access control, including attribute-based, discretionary, mandatory, role-based, and rule-based. Attribute-based allows access if the user meets a specific set of attributes as defined by the administrator. For example, a user might have to be at least 18 years old to use a website, and if the user can prove this is true, access is granted. Mandatory access control regulates access rights based on multiple levels of security. It is commonly used in the military and government, where classifications are assigned to users based on security clearance level. Similar to mandatory, role-based determines access rights by users' jobs or roles in the environment and depends on various security levels. The main difference between mandatory and role-based is mandatory controls read permissions based on the device clearance level, whereas role-based includes more complex controls such as credit card transactions. Rule-based operates by administrators assigning rules that limit access rights. It can be common for both rule and role-based to be used together. Authentication involves verifying an identity and access permissions prior to allowing entry into a system, file, application, or location. According to the New Zealand Information Security Manual, authentication is the process by which a claimed identity is verified and access permissions are confirmed before access is granted. Common authentication methods include biometrics, cryptographic tokens, software tokens, passwords, and smart cards. Biometrics are more likely to be used on desktops rather than laptops or mobile devices. Software tokens are applications that run on mobile devices, essentially using the device itself for verification through that application. These tokens are convenient and have functionality benefits including the user easily transferring between devices, using QR codes to facilitate deployment, and managing international time zone changes while traveling. However, a major threat poses if the device is lost, stolen, or infected with malware due to the attacker being able to gain full access to the device and easily authenticating themselves as the user. New Zealand agencies require authentication practices by having employees use unique identifier and passwords each time permission is requested on the system. Two-factor authentication is also required for access onto the system. Authorization then comes in to dictate what the authenticated identity can do. For example, if a user logs onto their company site with their current username and password, the identity is authorized to access. Authorization can also be used in groups. For example, only New Zealand's high-level government officials have authorization rights to access sealed documents regarding the nation's homeland security. While authentication and authorization work hand in hand, there are slight differences that allow them to work separately. There are several weaknesses that contribute to cybersecurity risk, the major ones being people, technology, and policy. These weaknesses often result in successful exploitation, putting all systems and data at risk. The main weakness and cause of cybersecurity risk are people. 80% of companies consider human factors, such as errors or lack of login security, as a major cause of increased cybersecurity risk. This is because, in most cases, hackers target users rather than systems. Phishing emails are a great example of this. It is easier for a hacker to bet on the user unknowingly divulging sensitive information rather than figuring out how to technically break into the system. And most of the time, the hacker's thinking is correct. Between phishing emails, a lack of login security, and the lack of training users, systems are subject to ransomware, viruses, denial of service attacks, and unsecured data. Ways to combat people as a cybersecurity weakness include training employees and users on cybersecurity risk and the importance of keeping login information secure. It is also imperative to train employees on what to look out for when receiving phishing emails and how the consequences of opening unknown links and attachments can negatively impact information security. Because cybersecurity and technology is continuously changing, it is also important that training for employees and users is ongoing. Another weakness and cause of cybersecurity risk is technology. While it may seem counterintuitive, technology can be its own worst enemy. Because it is constantly evolving, the lack of stability can be seen as both positive and negative. If there is no high-level strategy or infrastructure in place, cybersecurity risk increases. This is because when a security problem arises, there is no reference point on how to mitigate it. Implementing a high-level strategy and infrastructure that proactively seeks risk and outlines the steps necessary for remediation in the event of a cyber attack will significantly decrease this threat. Using outdated systems and software also put an environment at high cybersecurity risk. Outdated systems have a great amount of threat associated with them since there are more advanced systems that are better protected and are up to date with current and known vulnerabilities. While using a system or software that is a couple years old might be financially beneficial, the risk that comes with that is worth investing in the latest and safest technologies. Lack of network monitoring is also a major risk in cybersecurity. Monitoring allows administrators to learn the network pattern associated with the system, and this allows any discrepancies to be noticed if an attack takes place. Without knowing a normal pattern, it is hard to say whether there is unusual activity. Implementing a proper network monitoring and alert system that proactively watches the network and alerts administrators if there is a red flag will drastically decrease the cybersecurity risk in the system. The last major cybersecurity risk is policy. Implementing cybersecurity policy will help minimize risk. However, the policies, rules, and regulations must be concise and clear to be effective. New Zealand's cybersecurity strategy of 2019 has been criticized for being vague and having a lack of strategy, despite the document being called a strategy. While this document addresses the challenges to maintaining cybersecurity, what has been done so far, and government values regarding cybersecurity, there is an unclear outline of what the goals are for the nation and the path to successfully reaching those goals. This creates a lack of guidance for the public and makes the nation look as if it's not taking enough initiative to keep its government protected against cybercrime. New Zealand needs to create clear, concise goals for the nation's cybersecurity efforts and relay them to the public efficiently. Creating explicit policy will reduce the number of potential breaches and overall reduce the amount of cybersecurity risk for the nation. It is advised to accept the risk of people due to the fact that people are needed in all aspects of cybersecurity. Even monitoring systems that run autonomously or artificial intelligence still needs people to maintain functionality. Certain risks of technology should be accepted since there will always be some risks associated with using technology and considering it is necessary to function in today's society. However, it's advised to mitigate what can be alleviated, such as updating systems and software as new versions become available. While not all risk is gone, it's important to reduce the risk where capable. Finally, it is advised to completely mitigate the risk of policy. This is because policy is completely in the hands of the nation, government, country. The establishment can set the rules and have complete control over regulations. This makes policy the most malleable, thus the easiest to fix. While there is no way to completely reduce threats, implementing these recommendations will significantly decrease risk in cybersecurity.